I should probably start. Let's see. Cool. I am a design systems engineer at GitHub. I just moved to Santa Barbara like 4 weeks ago, so I'm brand new.
Yeah.
And I think I'm getting feedback. Let me just. Okay, there, that's better. Anyway, so I'm brand new here. I work remotely for GitHub, and I work on the primary design system. I originally was a front-end engineer. That was my background. And when I joined GitHub, I joined the design systems team. And now I have this weird title, design systems engineer. So what does that mean? Oh, this is my Essence GIF. So I've spoken at a lot of different like JavaScript meetups and conferences and stuff, and I'm never sure exactly how much people know about what design systems are. So I like to get started with just a definition. And this is kind of like my definition, how I define it. I think a design system is an ecosystem of tools, guidelines, shared values, and principles which help teams more efficiently ship consistent design. So the motto for design systems would be efficiently shipped, consistent design. What I don't think a design system is just a React component library, just CSS components, or just a style guide. I don't think that one tool makes it a system. So I think you have to have a few different things in order for it to be successful. At GitHub, we have CSS components, React components, Octacon's presentation library, which I use to build this presentation, interface guidelines, Figma components, and then we also have like some cultural tools like office hours. We review every single PR that touches CSS or markup at GitHub, which is kind of crazy and probably needs to not happen forever. And we also go to design reviews. So a little bit about the history of React at GitHub. The beginning of our design system was just CSS components, and that was great for a long time. It solved a lot of issues with our CSS bundle getting bigger and bigger as we shipped more features. But eventually we ended up in a state that you can see here where we had all of these classes, and this is just like a label, an input with a label. And there are 6 different class names that you had to know to be able to make this label look correctly, which wasn't really a great user experience for engineers who weren't super familiar with CSS, or for designers who weren't really super familiar with ERB. On top of that, we also left the markup decisions to the engineer. So in this case, they used a label and they used an ARIA label, which is accessible, but they could have just as easily used a div with no ARIA label and it wouldn't have been accessible at all, but it would have looked right. So we were looking for something to solve this issue, and that's why we started thinking about creating React components. We wanted to reduce the need to memorize class names and markup patterns, make it easy to update components across the code base, encapsulate CSS so we were having a lot of like global CSS bugs, and making theming possible or easier, because theming in the current setup wasn't super easy. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about the values that we put in place before we started building these React components, and kind of the philosophy that has guided us as we've built out this library of, we have about like 30 components now. So the first one is to assume that people will break the rules and provide safe ways for them to do so. So a design system's main goal is to enforce consistent design, but if your tools themselves aren't flexible enough, people just won't use them, because they need to add like a little bit of margin or change the color, and they can't do that with a tool. They're going to just like build something from scratch, and then you have all of that duplication and variance that you didn't want to begin with. So the tools that we kind of use to make our components flexible are, we use styled systems. So we have all these different style props that the user can edit. Those are things that change like color, background color, size, margin, padding, things that ideally we want people not to be changing all the time, but if they do change it, they pull values from a theme, which is like a standardized set of design tokens that we say, like, if you want to make changes, just make use the spacing scale or use the font size scale. everything is a component. So this might seem really obvious to a JavaScript developer or a React developer, but at GitHub, we're mostly a Rails shop. And so we have these view files that are insane. They have all of this markup in one view. And people weren't used to breaking things down into small pieces. So when we started introducing React, people were trying to build out like a whole page in one JSX file. So everything is a component was a really important value for us from the start. This one, a little duplication is better than overly clever code. This isn't actually a value that we had from the start, but it's a value that we added because about halfway through building the components, we realized the system that we had put in place, we were using styled system and styled components, and then we wanted to do all these other things. So we're adding all these hacks on top of it. And we realized even us, the people who wrote this code, were having a hard time maintaining it. And that was a red alert that like this code was going to just be basically instant code debt if we went forward in this fashion. So we actually stopped and refactored just with the purpose of making it a lot simple. And in a lot of cases, we actually like undried our code because we added duplication just for making it easier to read and easier for it to reason with. So my takeaway is to establish values early on. These values have kind of been like our North Star for this project. It's made onboarding people onto our team a lot easier because we could point right back to them. And it helped us with really hard technical decisions that we had to make. That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Fantastic. All right. Next up, we have a young lady who is one of my very favorite people here at Procore. She was on a team that I first started on here, and I've had the great pleasure and privilege to watch her grow and to make a career transition, and that is what she's going to speak about tonight. This is Yvette Zhu with the transition to developer.
Hold on. What's happening? Sorry. Zoom. I think I got it. I use Zoom. Yeah. All right. Take my entire desktop. Oh, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? Oh, this is my mic. All right. Hi, everyone. My talk today will be learning to code and my personal journey. My name is Yvette Zhu. Previously, I was a QA engineer, like Tim said, and I transitioned early this year to front-end software developer. In this talk, I'll kind of go over what I did to become successful in this transition. Disclaimer, everyone's different, so take what I'm about to tell you with a grain of salt and use what you think is beneficial to you. But again, everyone's different, so it may work for me, but it might not work for you. So let's get started. Tip number one is to build the study habit. The first question you have to ask is, can you study at your current job? If yes, that's freaking awesome. Take that opportunity to learn while you're getting paid for it. If not, which is normal for a lot of companies, that's okay. You just have to start building the study habit. My tip for that would be to start small. Take a lot of breaks in between. When I first started my journey in 2017, early 2017, I was probably studying after work once a week. And then by the end of 2017, I was probably doing it maybe like twice a week and sometimes on the weekend. Beginning of 2018, I was probably studying Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I had like a set schedule and maybe one day on the weekend. And then by 2018, so last year when my transitioning was kind of starting, I was studying every day, Monday through Friday, after work for like 3 hours, and then 9 to 5 on the weekends. So it was basically like a part-time job. But at that point, I really enjoyed it, and I was really hoping for the full transition. So this worked for me, but I also know a lot of people who went to boot camps to help with that, and that's good too, because they kind of help you build the study habit with them. Tip number 2 would be to start with vanilla. When I say vanilla, it's HTML, CSS, core JavaScript. Flavors are like jQuery, Angular, and React. They're good to have once you understand the concepts, the core concepts. There's this great developer roadmap that someone shared with me around 2018, so when I was really getting serious about it. And it tells you here too to start with the vanilla, the basics, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, core basics. This is actually where I started, all the way down there, and that's React. That's frameworks. So I messed up. I spent all of 2017 kind of like dabbling in React, and it really didn't get me anywhere other than thinking, it's black magic. There's a render function, stuff happens, and there's state, stuff is stored somewhere, and I can get it anytime. So in 2018, I took a big U-turn, and I went back to starting at the top of this path, and I really made my way all the way down, and now I understand React and all the black magic that happens underneath. So I would recommend definitely starting with vanilla. Tip number 3, ask questions. Every developer is going to tell you to ask. The first thing is Google. Ask Google first. Google has Stack Overflow, MDM, W3. Majority of the time, they'll have your answer. But if you're self-teaching yourself, I also understand that the answers will be answered with jargon that you don't understand yet. So then you get into this rabbit hole of like, what does this mean? So the next step is to ask a human, make a friend. I think that these JS meetups are a great place where you can meet someone and just ask a question. So then it might even spark up another topic where it's like, someone's like, I don't understand hooks. Oh shoot, I know about hooks. Let me do a presentation. And now we have the life cycle of talks for Tim at JS Meetup. So don't be afraid, be brave, ask a question. Tip number 4, challenge yourself. There was a point in 2018 where I was like, I don't even know what to study anymore. Like I went through the path, what do I do? And the next step was just to challenge myself. I built an app from scratch. Like I built my own portfolio. I struggled a bit building a single page app in just vanilla JavaScript, and it taught me a lot. The next thing you can do to challenge yourself is to teach someone else what you've just learned. By teaching someone, you solidify your own knowledge and confirming that you understand it. And I'll do a shameless plug here, and I'm a mentor at another network called 805 Tech Mentor Network. We host a hackathon once a year where you watch kids who have no coding experience learn to code and build projects in a hackathon. This would be a great place for you to solidify your knowledge because you're teaching these kids who know nothing, basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or whatever else you want to teach them. So if you want to become a mentor, join now at 805 Tech Mentor Network. Just to wrap it up, these are the tips again. Build a study habit, start with vanilla, ask questions, and challenge yourself. These are the 4 things I followed rigorously for 2 years to become a software engineer. Thank you very much. If you have questions, ask.
All right, thanks, Yvette. I've been trying to get Yvette to do that talk for a couple of years now. And, every time I pass her in the hallway, I'm like, you have to give a talk at the JavaScript meetup.
Question.
You finally
We
did.
have a question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna ask, what was your greatest challenge throughout the whole process
Greatest challenge?
and greatest accomplishment?
Oh, great questions. Should I repeat?
Yeah, repeat.
Sorry. The question was greatest challenge and greatest accomplishment. Greatest challenge was the habit of studying after work. Procore was nice enough to let me study sometimes at work, but majority of the time was just building that habit. That was the biggest challenge of like going home after 9 to 5 and going, I'm going to study for 3 more hours and not watch TV. So that sucked, but after I accomplished that, it became like a really nice thing. Like I looked forward to doing it every night. Greatest accomplishment was building my own app. Like I built my portfolio first, and before I was using React and all these like jQuery helpers and stuff, and so building it, you learned so much more, but I also struggled so much more. So I was really proud of my portfolio. I linked it, but don't go to it. It's not that great right now. But yeah.
Yes. Why did you decide to become a programmer or a software engineer?
The question was, why did I decide to become a software developer? As QA, it's kind of sad sometimes when you find a bug and like nobody wants to fix it. They're like, next time. So I guess like to me, I was just like, I'm just gonna do it. Like I want to fix it, and I really liked coding. We did front end automation for testing in QA, so that sparked it. I actually learned Ruby first, and then I tried learning Ruby on Rails, and that was terrible. So I decided not to do a backend. Wouldn't recommend. All right, thank you.
You did it. You finally gave the talk, and it was awesome. All right, our next speaker is not only a regular attendee at the JavaScript meetup here, he's also spoken quite a few times and given some really interesting, enlightening, and well-received talks. I'd like to bring up Mr. Elijah Lovejoy, talking about service work. All right. Hey.
And do I share in both Zoom and both of them? Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Awesome.
Moment, awkward silence. Nothing's easy these days, is it?
This is so hard because I
Of
have
course, we
to
make
share
things harder by having not one
twice.
but two different screen share programs.
Okay. And so you guys can hear me? Yes? Okay. And is my sheet gonna, can I assume it's showing up that we're working? Cool. So how many people here know what web push is?
Kind of.
Okay, cool. So I'll try to explain it. I got two hands. So I don't think I had any idea what it was until there's somebody who came and talked about progressive web apps at a meetup a month or two ago, and I went and looked at what the definition of that was and tripped over web push, and then I kept getting websites that were asking me to give me notifications, and I was wondering what that was, and it's super cool. So I'm going to try to explain it to you. I've been just learning how to use it the last 2 weeks, which means I'm probably going to tell you something wrong. So if you hear me say something stupid, definitely correct me. My company built a collaboration and project management tool that one of the things we do is you can send somebody a message, and in some cases when you get a message from someone that's important about a release or some customer facing project, it'd be really cool to do everything we can to give you a notification. And so we were excited at the idea of having native notifications even when the app wasn't running, which we can sort of get to with web push now, and it sounds like we're gonna be able to get most of the way there. And along the way, started playing with Firebase cloud messaging. How many people here have used Firebase? Okay, so I'll explain a little bit about what Firebase does, which I barely understand, but it's insanely cool. And because I've been living off an AWS land and building React Redux apps, so I opened Firebase for the first time about 2 weeks ago, and it's a complete set of tools for building web apps and native apps, and there's some just amazing things there. So I'm guessing most of you have visited a website that asked you if it could give you notifications in the last few months. And if you enable that, you're basically giving the browser permission to generate a native notification. And that can happen even when your page is closed, as long as the browser is running, or if you're on Android, it'll actually happen anytime because the browser is tightly integrated to the operating system. So it's a super cool idea. And it's all built on top of service workers, which I've been doing front-end development for way too long, so service workers kind of freak me out because they're weird. But basically, we now have this little routing layer. So it's almost like somebody took Squid or some proxy server from the back end and moved it up to right underneath the browser. And this so the service worker can now listen for messages coming from all the different web push providers, and so we'll talk about, you know, Google, Microsoft, and Mozilla all have web push services that support the API. Apple is special, so they don't, because they're Apple. I love how Apple is like the new IE. At least I have a friend who works in video, and he's just pulling his hair out about Apple every day, all day long. So that's nice. So at a rough level, and I've not even started to test this thoroughly on all the different browsers on all the different platforms. So super happy to be wrong about this. Is if the application is active and a push notification comes in, it's just going to go straight through to the application, and the application has a handler, and it'll do whatever you want it to do. And just it's a JSON message. We'll look at a message in a second. Now the next step is that you could have the browser running, but your app is in a background tab, or your tab is actually closed. And at that point, the message is going to go to the service worker, and the service worker is going to trigger a this native notification that we're all familiar with. And if you click on it, it'll actually open a new tab or pull your tab up from the foreground and hand some or all of that notification to your app. And I'll show you a couple examples of parts of the notification being removed, part of the payload still being there in the message. And then if your browser isn't running, what seems to happen surprisingly reliably is that the message will just get queued, and then when you start up your browser, any notifications that have come in are likely to become available. And there's a couple of caveats to that, and I can go a lot deeper, because I've been basically living in this for 2 weeks. But I'm going to try to be coherent. So stop me if it gets confusing. So far, what I've been seeing is all the good documentation is either coming out of Google or coming out of Mozilla. And Mozilla has created a service worker cookbook, which is super cool. If you haven't looked at it, it's just got a bunch of really easy to deploy recipes that are using a bunch of open libraries for push. But I was actually having some issues getting that working. And so then I discovered Firebase, and Google is giving it away for free, and all they're stealing is our metadata, which seems reasonable. The documentation is pretty good. The API simplifies a bunch of stuff, so I'll show you a little bit of the code for that, and hopefully that'll make some sense. So this is a subscription. How many people here have played with a subscription or seen one before? Cool. So this endpoint thing is the thing that just totally hurts my head. So I guess it would have been maybe a better slide to have an example of an actual push service, but you could imagine like fcm.google.com or something like that, and FCM is Firebase Cloud Messaging, and they've had I think GCM was their old version of their cloud messaging, and the different service providers are going to create a unique URL, which is basically the URL of their push service, followed by a unique token, which is the unique token for not just for your app, but for the particular instance of your app that a particular user has agreed to get notifications to. And so that means that now, like, you know, if I agree to let somebody give me notifications on my laptop, I'm going to have this unique URL that people can send messages to. And that just seems really weird and backwards to me, because web pages go to URLs. They don't have URLs, but it's 2019, so we do cool stuff. There's a bunch of cryptography that I'm not going to talk about because I barely understand it, but basically the browser has a public key and the app has a public key, and that lets them share messages and have them encrypted in case the push services are untrustworthy. And it means that if a message comes to the browser has reasonable confidence that it was sent by the app. So this is the public key of the browser and another encryption thing I don't understand. So I took a couple screenshots of these test messages that I'm generating, and coming out of the Mac notification thing on the right side there that I never use. So these are things that got queued while I had my browsers closed. And here's two different examples of messages that are really similar. So if you played with native messages, there's a whole bunch of metadata that you can include in your messages. The ones that the Firebase API that I'm using is supporting is just the title, body, an icon, and a click action, which means that if somebody clicks on this message when it comes through, they're going to go to this particular URL, which is just my local host. And what's interesting here is if I then put my app in the background and send a message and click on it, the notification part, this part here, gets stripped out. So you'll see that I'm just echoing everything in the data, because basically you get to send the notification in data. But it's super cool because, again, I think most of us have played with WebSockets in terms of keeping relatively fresh information available, and that's kind of cool. But being able to actually have information sent to us when we're offline is still kind of hurts my head. And there are some mechanisms for if there's a series of messages and you want whatever the latest message to be the only one that's paid attention to. I think that's what the collapse key is there to say, do collapse all the messages to the latest one. And I think if you say do not collapse, you're telling your app to read all the messages. So now we have a way for people who choose to enable it to send messages to browsers that are not Apple. So that's pretty cool. And so far, to the extent that I'm doing browser testing, I am actually getting native notifications. And again, I haven't finished testing it, but it's pretty cool and seriously weird. So the Firebase Cloud Messaging sets up a bunch of stuff out of the box. One of the things that's interesting is the way they set it up is you don't actually have to do anything on the service worker side. So I haven't really played a whole lot with the service worker because there's a bunch of other stuff to play with. And just dropping their boilerplate in there means that everything starts to basically work. And I thought that was a cool way of learning a new technology, so I appreciated that. I'm sure there's a cost for that at some point. And then I'm not showing you here that I've put a bunch of Google libraries into my application, but again, the same thing is happening. And the handlers that I've been playing with here, obviously the main one while the app is active is the on message. So anytime a message arrives when the app is active, I can show it host. If the app is active, there will not be a native notification generated. If the app is in the background or the window is closed, we'll get a native notification. And then it turns out that the hardest part of this for me is handling the tokens. So a couple screens ago, I showed you what a subscription looks like. What the Firebase Cloud Messaging does is takes that and turns it into a unique token. So then I can send a message to Google servers with this token, and they'll map it to that particular subscription. But subscriptions can be revoked. In some cases, Google either a new subscription gets generated or Google is refreshing a token for no reason. So that means that we can't trust that subscriptions are going to be available tomorrow. And so we need to have a mechanism not only to add subscriptions as people agree to get notifications, but we have to have a mechanism to refresh the subscriptions and to get rid of subscriptions that are no longer working, which turns out to be a little tricky. And if anybody has figured out how to do this, because I'm assuming people have been doing this for native apps for a long time and wants to talk to me about it afterwards, I would really appreciate it. Because I'm trying to stuff a bunch of stuff in Dynamo and make sure I can find it later, and kind of hurts my head. Okay, so fundamentally, I think one of the things that's been really surprising is that getting the push notifications to work has turned out to be a lot harder to think about than I would have guessed, mostly because it's just such a different type of development than anything that I've done in a browser before, and mostly because I had never really actually used a service worker, and so that was new. I thought Firebase was basically cool because there's just a bunch of conventions and documentation and code that seems to work, so that made me happy. There's a bunch of other good stuff that's in Firebase, since most of you, it seems, haven't played with it. They've got some real-time database stuff, a bunch of authentication stuff. There's like 16 analytics, of course. So there's a bunch of things for app developers that are going to be sort of the usual trade-offs who use Google Analytics, but it was pretty cool to see that. And that means that I get to buy a little bit of time to figure out how to manage tokens, which has been the hard part so far. Sending messages is basically not that hard, except for the fact that I'm trying to do it from a Lambda function, and the library that Google provides really wants to be a persistent node instance, so I'm using just posts and putting a key that I shouldn't use in every post request, but that seems to be the way of it. That's sort of the old Google API, basically, that doesn't have OAuth integrated into it. So one of the things really interesting about Web Push is we can't rely on it. We need the users to opt in. There's got to be use cases where messages just disappear, so it seems a little bit more like UDP than TCP/IP. Apple is marching to their own drum. The other thing is that, like, I think there's a bunch of UX stuff. Like, what's really interesting is if you start Googling Web Push, you're going to find like all of these marketing companies that are saying that web's the best thing for marketing. So of course everybody's going to turn it off as soon as they start getting spammed with coupons and stuff. So figuring out how to deliver value to users before asking them to agree to get notifications, and figuring out how to make sure that we really ratchet back the notifications can be interesting. And so I have a ton of questions because I'm still learning this stuff. So if you have answers, I'd love to hear it. I'm trying to figure out how to manage tokens. I'm really trying to figure out like whether it's really mature enough that we can start using it and deploying it to some of our customers. And the other thing that's really interesting is that because it's using the service worker stuff, it only works on localhost, SSL, and you can't use incognito. Well, we use Cypress for most of our integration testing, which all happens inside of an incognito window. So I don't know how to test push either. So if you know anything about that, I'd love to hear about it. And yeah, and I'm deep in it, so if you have any technical questions, I might actually have a chance. But I think that's everything I've got.
Awesome, thank you, Elijah. Always interesting, and you're always welcome back. All right, we look, we have infinite recursion on the screen here. Exception. All right, cool. So next up we have Mr. Sean Helvey, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about the tech meetup scene here in Santa Barbara, which you're all a part. So this one's about you guys. Ready to get like this? Yeah. Get Zoom.
Yep.
Open somewhere. All right, should get clear. And then share screen. Awesome.
Sweet.
All right, good?
Yep. So nervous, giving a lightning talk. Oh my gosh, what's happening? Cool. So the point of this talk is that we need, or nerd community. And what Tim said is so true. It's definitely about you, and it's not about me. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, but the point is that it's about y'all here, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. I went to Cal Poly SLO. Yeah. And then moved to New York, which I would not recommend also. Don't go there. I mean, go there if you want to go there, but I had some mixed experiences there, which I'll talk more about as far as the community goes. I found my way to Boulder, Colorado for the last 7 years. I was living there, growing this beard. And then I came out to Santa Barbara 6 months ago. I'm a software engineer at AppFolio.
Nice.
Yeah. So what's up, SB? Happy to be here. And looking back at some of those stops on my journey, one of the first moments that was really influential for me was just being in the computer lab coding with other nerds. Can anybody relate to that? Cool. Yeah, there was just nothing like that feeling for me of being right next to one or two people who are just as passionate as you are, that know what you're talking about, what you're going through, where you're like finishing each other's thoughts, like, hey, if we move this code over there, we can do this thing. And it, to this day, I think that's why I like coding. So that was a good experience. When I moved to New York, and this, I know that I don't think Disrupt is in New York, but this was the first picture that I came across that kind of captures the anxiety of the NYC meetup scene. It was just really uncomfortable going to meetups there. I was kind of new to web. Does anybody know who Jeremy Ashkenas is? Has anybody ever heard of Backbone.js?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know, it was 2011 or 10 or something, and I went to a JavaScript meetup just trying to meet some people, and I remember going in the elevator up, and Jeremy Ashkenas was speaking. I might be saying his last name wrong. Am I saying that right, Tim? Okay. And he I think he made Backbone.js and some other libraries, and I hadn't used Backbone at the time. And underscore, yeah, that's right. And in the elevator up, I made some comment to a guy, and I was like, oh yeah, like I'm not using Backbone, like I'm still just using jQuery. And he was like, well, you can use Backbone with jQuery. And I was like, okay, cool. Like this is clearly a competition on who's the smartest and who knows the most things. But it was just really off-putting and scary for me. And so, I mean, to the extent that we can just like continue to foster a welcoming community and not be too sassy if we know stuff, like let's just do that and be cool. When I moved to Colorado, I wanted to hug everybody because everybody was so collaborative and friendly and smart, and it was crazy. And I didn't know anybody when I went there for Boulder Startup Week, which is not a thing here. We don't have a Startup Week, do we? In Santa Barbara, we have Startup Weekend, but I don't know if we have a week of startup things. I didn't know anybody, and everybody was so friendly and just collaborative, and it changed everything for me. I went to Boulder Startup Week. At the time, in 2012, I wrote an essay, and they would pay for people to fly to Boulder to like visit for Boulder Startup Week, and we would crash on somebody's couch, and then they'd have a whole week of free events, and we would just cruise around and like go to free events for no reason, because it was just like unbelievable amount of generosity on behalf of the community, I'd say, to try to be so inclusive. I made a ton of friends, and I love all the people there because of that kind of community action. So 6 months ago, I moved out here and didn't know anybody, and actually formed, we called it a blood pact, but we did the pinky swear thing because I met a couple of regular attendees to this meetup at LogMeIn when Elijah spoke last. And it was Andrea and Austin. I don't know if anybody out there knows those two. And I met him at the meetup, and then I saw him at a concert, and we were like, let's do this. We're going to talk at the Lightning Talks. And they both bailed out. Andrew was still listed on there yesterday, and I emailed him today, and they just bailed. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is that when you don't know anybody and you move to a new town and you go to a meetup, the connections that you make there are really important. Like, I don't know. It's tough not knowing anybody when you go somewhere new. And just to show up and be able to talk about JavaScript or talk about whatever, it's a huge deal, and it made me feel welcome here. And so I just wanted to highlight that. It means the world to me. But why? Like, why do we need /nerd community? These people become actual friends in real life. Like, people that I've met at meetups, they end up being your board game friends, or people you go for hikes with, or whatever, and that's a big deal. So this isn't just like a networking thing that is meaningless. It's like, these are actual friends. You guys are hopefully going to be actual friends. It's really good for your mental and emotional health. Like, you can read a bunch of science, it's in the news and stuff. But personally, I mean, lately I've been coming to terms with the fact that I struggle with anxiety. Like, I don't know, does anybody out there feel like they might have anxiety sometimes? Okay, cool. But for me, having some accountability and like a blood pact that we're gonna give lightning talks, or that I'm gonna come down to Carp tonight and not just go home to Goleta and like watch Ancient Aliens or Mr. Robot or something. What was funny about that? I don't know. I mean, are you not watching Mr. Robot or Ancient Aliens? Yeah. But this is an exaggeration, but for people out there that need community, it's just critically important, and you might even be saving people's lives. Like, if someone's so lonely, or someone doesn't have any community to hang out with or connect with, like, they could really be hurting, much worse than me. And us being here and supporting each other is huge. It inspires us. I mean, every time I see Elijah here, he's doing something crazy. I love. I think there was a category theory talk at a meetup. Was that the JavaScript meetup?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Yeah, that was crazy, and it was really cool to see people be like, "Whoa, this category theory stuff is too complicated," and we all bonded over it, and it was nice. Like, I liked it, and so it's just an opportunity to learn new things and level up. We get to share perspectives. A lot of different people here with different perspectives. We get to help each other learn. I'm pumped about this 805 Tech Mentor meetup that Yvette mentioned. Yeah, I want to do that. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do it.
And the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So I work at Appfolio, right? Tim, you work at Procore. But we all, no, I mean, who cares? I care because I like my job, and I like where I work and everything, and I'm sure you do too. But like, I'm so happy that we can come to the meetup independent of our companies and connect and have community. So, and I think it benefits everybody. I think it benefits any of the companies in the area. It's more than just a zero-sum game. Like, think of the Boulder example, right? Where they're bringing anybody that wants to come into their community, irrespective of where they land or where they end up working. So, please just shout it out or raise your hand. Like, do you have any thoughts on what are your favorite or least favorite things about the tech community in Santa Barbara? Honest question.
SPJS.
We all know we love SPJS.
It's too small sometimes.
It's too small?
It feels like.
Yeah. I hear you. That's part of the reason I wanted to come and share how important it is, because I think there's more potential too. But any other thoughts? Come on. There's no thoughts on the tech community. Y'all came to CARP tonight to see these talks, and you don't have any feels on the tech community? Yep.
All right. Well, this is my first meetup.
Yeah.
It was easy enough to get to and open, so that was cool. I didn't have to pay some sort of fee or
Exactly.
join some sort of group. I just kind of showed up.
Because of the generous organizers and all the people that come regularly and help out and stuff, and the sponsors.
Yeah.
Yep.
Super cool.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Oh, we got a couple more. Go ahead, Elijah.
So I'll just call out that there's the tech community in Santa Barbara is much bigger than we realized. I just talked to 2 different companies this month. One of them makes some kind of something called a semiconductor pit laser, which I didn't even know it existed, but it's like a little tiny laser the size of a grain of sand. And the other one is basically, as far as I can tell, and I don't really understand what they do, but it's basically a machine shop for microelectronic mechanical components. And again, so they're building all these different mechanical silicon parts for all these different customers. It's like, I just keep being blown away by the depth of the technology, in especially like these weird dilapidated buildings in Goleta, where people are just like building stuff that you can't find anywhere else on the planet. And it's just cool, right?
I think so. Yeah. Was there another hand in the back?
Well, I want to, I guess, two things now, but yeah, piggyback on that is there are many little enclaves
Yeah.
of like tech of like Los Carneros and Goleta, and then also on the other side of the freeway, there's so much stuff that if you drive, like you go to Amsterdam or something, there's, over by Apollo, there's a lot of tech things that you would drive by every day, and you would have no idea that they exist. Same for Cart. But I think the other one is it's how I got my first job. Like I don't think, or first good job. I don't think I would have gotten a good job in tech unless I was hanging out and talking to people and, I guess spark interest in that person mentoring me and giving me a chance. So, yeah.
That's how it works, right? You could look at it like, oh, it's superficial networking, or you could look at it like it's real connections and it's important.
It can be real.
Yep. So some ideas I've been kicking around. I really used to enjoy coffee groups. We called it open coffee. I guess here we call it lean coffee, but coffee. And then maybe, we get together and have drinks here, but you could do more of a happy hour style thing. You could host like a conference even. I mean, we could draw people to Santa Barbara hosting a conference. Or we could do maybe a tech meetup that's not just focused on JavaScript. Like that's another possibility if anybody wanted to spin something up. Some questions. Y'all pointed out the exact thing that I was thinking with the geographic challenges. One thing that was helpful in Colorado, they had a Slack channel that was called Tech Friends that was not dependent on where exactly people were located, right? Like we could potentially have a Slack channel for everybody in Santa Barbara. By the way, like what would you even call this area? The area from, I mean, I know it's kind of the Central Coast, but Central Coast is a pretty broad term, and it's kind of 805, yeah. That seems reasonable. But you could have a Slack channel where we can all communicate. We can call it the 805 Slack channel. What's up?
California's elbow.
Oh, it's California's elbow. There you go. But it's obviously tricky for us to get in the same. Are some people here tonight from Morro Bay? Someone was saying earlier, or yeah?
From Morro Bay, but
You're not actually commuting from Morro Bay. Did anybody come down here from far away? There you go. But I mean, I mean, hey. So, but we all come together for meetups like this, and it's great that we do, and we can continue doing that. Sometimes I wonder, do I really care about the tech, or do I care about entrepreneurship and business, or do I really just care about the community in and of itself and other aspects of that? I'm not sure. Meetup versus non-meetup. If we were to continue to try to build community in other ways, like is it better to be on Meetup or off Meetup? Not sure. Sharing ownership in organization is a tricky one. Like, sure, any of us could go out there and start something tomorrow, but obviously we get a lot further if we stick together and collaborate on things. So, in conclusion, we need our nerd community. And if anybody is inspired or wants to continue to build it in some way, I would love to get involved. I don't think they're, I know these guys have the JS meetup under control here, and I'm definitely going to keep coming to this, but maybe we can do more. And thank you, though, to the organizers, because I'm telling you, it's a big, big deal when you don't know anybody in a city and you can show up and meet people at a JavaScript meetup. So thank you. Can we give it up for them? And please feel free to reach out anytime. That's my Twitter handle, or hit me up on Meetup. Just want to connect with all of you. So thank you.
Some questions?
Yeah.
all right. So I haven't ventured far outside of Santa Barbara, like in the meetup space.
but it seems like you had some experience in Boulder. And and New York, but aside from the Slack channel, were there other things that those cities have done well that you would like to do?
There's an organization in New York called HackNY that hosted a bunch of amazing hackathons, and it was really collaborative and awesome. Boulder Startup Week was a big inspiration. Ignite Boulder, which is like a TED Talk style event, which was another one that was big for me. I mean, a lot of people liked Creative Mornings. I'm an engineer, but Creative Mornings is another community thing that people seem to love. So yeah, those are the ones that come up off the top of my head. And it's strange here because yeah, I don't know what else to say. Did you have any other thoughts?
No, not necessarily, aside from just like the events that you had gone to and like what they had done well, and like that may be different from this JS meetup.
Oh, I mean, I don't think anything needs to change. The JS meetup is awesome.
No, yeah, but like on top of that.
Yeah, not sure. I mean, I guess another random thought is that volunteering has always been really great. Like I've volunteered at Strange Loop conference. I've volunteered at some other conferences, and that's another easy in to like meet people and help and learn stuff. But why don't maybe we can brainstorm more and think about how we could contribute.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I'm Celine. I'm new here.
Yeah.
Also first time. And I love JavaScript, but I just started using it, and I was kind of wondering, like, in terms of the greater community of tech, if you knew of any, or if there was any interest in just doing like a larger web development in general, or software engineering in general versus just like a specialized JavaScript type of meetup, if you know of that, or?
Well, I know Tim's always been like really open to hosting other technologies here. But also I'm curious about that. I'm curious about opening it up and doing something that would complement this, also. So I know there's the Agile meetup, like they have some good meetups going on. Next week there's one, I think. And part of the reason.
Learn to Code SE, which does like kind of agnostic, learn how to code. It's great, builds an amazing feature.
Yeah, but if anybody else has thoughts on that question right now, like part of the reason I did the talk was to learn and to have the conversation. So any other thoughts on other meetups or things like that around town that you enjoy?
I'm not sure if there's like a big community of people that get along together with like the embedded systems tech guys and everything like that. So I mean, I guess the issue is how do we reach out to them? Because I mean, there's some complementary skill sets there, like with all the tech that Elijah was talking about. There's little embedded programmers, C++ guys. I'm a member over at the Santa Barbara Hackerspace, and
cool.
There's one other JavaScript guy there, and I don't know. I guess I didn't know that you were coming here tonight, or did, so maybe you are also. But everybody else there is doing like .NET and like backend kind of stuff and DevOps things and everything. But there's a ton of there's a ton of little small, or what you would imagine are small, but are actually pretty big companies all over the place. I think Garmin's pretty giant, and they have a ton of like C++ guys.
Yeah, people here from LinkedIn tonight, people from Honey. I mean, it's just like such an amazing community, and so that was the point, is to get us all pumped about it and see how we can contribute like these two are doing with this meetup that we're at tonight.
Yeah. There's a women in tech organization in the area too.
There is?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a meetup group or not, but I know there's some sort of organization.
Yeah, there was an awesome diversity in tech meetup a while back too. I don't know if that's related or different. Anyways, I love all y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome, Sean. Yeah, thanks so much. And I want to say a couple things. The first is on behalf of the entire SVJS community, thank you for not bailing on us tonight. Yeah, that's awesome. And the second thing is we're always looking for help with this meetup. Sean and the rest of you. Garvin's been my awesome right-hand man now for about 5 years. But as effortless as we might make this look, these things don't run themselves. And we are looking for people to get involved. And we're looking for people to do outreach with the rest of the community. Help us with logistics, finding speakers, sponsors, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, definitely let us know. We want help. We want you to get involved. This is your meetup as much as it is ours. So With that in mind, our next speaker is Mr. Nick Burwell. He's going to be talking to us about building a personal assistant with Node and JavaScript APIs. And I've just been advised that we have a last-minute addition to the speaker lineup. So we're going to have not just one more after Nick, but two more speakers. Hey, Sean, where'd you put the mic?
I set it right over here on this counter. I thought there was another one. Yeah.
Did I get everything, Garvin?
Okay, you're good. Hey, Nick Burwell.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick. I work at Invoca with Garvin here. And yeah, I just wanted to share just a little personal side project that I built a little while back and used entirely Node and JavaScript for it. So the use case was I have several small children and they're in elementary school now, so they're supposed to be dressing themselves, but they're constantly asking like, what's the weather? How hot is it going to get later today? Is it windy? Like even in Santa Barbara, you'd be surprised at the variance in weather when dressing small children, that need to be out the door at 7:38 and gone till 3. And of course, there are apps that you can pull up to look at the weather, but who wants to unlock your phone and go to an app just to get that info? As engineers, we want to optimize and optimize. So I thought it'd be cool to just get a notification in the morning of what the weather was and exactly the parameters that I was looking for. And then at a similar time, I got burned a few times just commuting to work and getting stuck in traffic. Again, Santa Barbara problems, the commute's about 14 minutes from my house. But when there's an accident, that could be 20, 25, 30 minutes. And we're pretty remote friendly at work. So if there is an accident, I can work at home, wait for that to subside, and then go into the office. And I would constantly forget to check Google traffic before heading out to work. So I wanted those things sent to my phone, like on demand, if there was an issue. So the technologies I ended up using was Heroku, JavaScript, Node, and Slack to send that final notification. That last piece was just because I already have Slack on my phone, and they have super simple push notifications. So I just went with that. But that last part could definitely be swapped out for anything else. Another goal I had just
Thank you, Nick. I should mention Nick was one of our last 3 speakers who stepped up today to fill in for people who dropped out. So Nick reached out this afternoon and said, "Are you still looking for speakers? I can put something together real quick." So that was awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right. So next up is another fill-in speaker. My colleague Ryan Yogan is going to be talking about GraphQL, getting up and running quickly with Prisma.
Yeah.
All right. I told him nobody cares about GraphQL, so it's probably just going to fall flat. Nobody cares about me. Everyone cares about you, Ryan.
Sorry, I'm sober.
Yeah, so should have got an email from Garmin. That will have the, let me get you that. Actually, the Zoom link will be in the calendar invite. Was that by?
Sorry, I'm always like this. This is normal. Welcome to working with
I
me.
also think I omitted him from the email with the screen share link.
Oh, I thought I had told you that.
It's all right. Oh, maybe you did.
I got it. We'll find out. Yeah, there's that. But we're going to ask you to join not just one, but 2 screen shares.
Oh, yeah?
That's one. And then if you check your Procore email, you should have got one from Garvin Kusky.
How y'all doing today? A lot of new people here. That's awesome. Raise your hand if you're new. Look at Ryan trying to kill time.
Yeah. But as your regular showman, that's how you kill these silent dead spots. We did, of course, as I said, ask the speakers to join not just one, but 2 screen sharing programs. We're gluttons for punishment here. Everything that can go wrong will, twice.
Which one? This one right there?
Yep. Join that one as well. And then you want to clip this somewhere.
Someone else can hear you on their screen, so and they were connected to the Zoom, so I don't know.
I see your email.
That's okay.
Oh,
It worked out.
We're almost there, folks, I promise.
Holy mackerel, I need to hit that. All right, I just saw your video join, but if you could now share your screen. Yeah. Please, thank you. All right, cool.
Is that everything?
All right.
Could you share your screen on the
other screen share? I share it twice.
Yeah. There it is.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Ryan Yogan, everyone.
What an introduction. I gotta say that one, everything here resonated with me a lot, but the talk about being new in a new place and trying to learn. I got my keister kicked in New York, Boston, just all those places. Ask somebody a question about Clojure. Holy mackerel. All right. Anyway, my name is Ryan Yogan. I work here at Procore. I love it. I work here with Tim. I bet she's not there anymore. All sorts of fantastic people. Really quick question, just raise of hands. Have you ever used GraphQL before? All right, wow, cool. Raise of hands if you have no idea what GraphQL is. Awesome. Today we're going to implement a GraphQL server in C++ and Perl, which is why you're all here, right? Awesome. I don't do slides. I'm a live programmer because I'm never prepared. I will send out some stuff, though. I also have a little gist for you. GraphQL.org, though, just really, really, really high level. If you're not familiar with what GraphQL is, here are 2 bullet points that you could take home and run with to your CTO tomorrow. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Number 1, it is a specification. REST is not a spec. Don't let anybody tell you it is. there are about 5 different specs around it, much like SOAP had WSDL compliance, etc. So being a true specification means that any platform, any language, erroneous on all accounts, it's going to be the same. I love that. It also means it's 10 times easier to develop for an API that's not constantly changing. The other big thing, at least to me, this is to me one of the most compelling aspects of GraphQL, is that it is a query language. But what's absolutely fantastic about it is that it's an extremely intelligent query language, and we're going to talk about how it's statically typed today, and we're going to talk about the future of GraphQL. So from here on out, what we're going to do is we're going to build a really quick little application, and we're going to talk about Prisma. Now, if you don't know who the fellows and the ladies and gentlemen at Prisma are, does anybody remember Meteor.js? Ooh, real sharp individuals, and they got a lot of money. MDG Group. They split Apollo, Prisma, all that. So the reason why this stuff is so just mind-bendingly awesome is there are really, really fantastic individuals that are just, I'm going to say it, they're hell-bent on seeing this technology succeed. So getting started with GraphQL can be a little complex sometimes. And what we're actually going to be talking about today is Prisma 2, which isn't out yet. We're going to talk about Photon and Lift. And from the client side down, everything is statically typed now. You can go as far as WebAssembly and Rust on the client side if you want to get crazy. But let's just build something together. I want to show you how everything works together. I want to show you how in less than 3 minutes you can have a working example. And then from there, we'll talk about where to go. So it's hard to type on an angle. I just realized that. I'll send out the notes, by the way, of any prerequisites that you would need installed on your machine. So what are we going to build today? We're going to build a Blogger, because like there's never been a Twitter client before, ever. So we're going to call one called Shout It. Tweet it. So what we're going to do is we're going to type Prisma, but not Prisma, Prisma 2. We're going to type it, and first one in name. What's the name of this app called? Holla? Like Holla Macro? Okay. So I really like, actually, wow. Yeah. I have to kill it. How's about that? Okay? So Prisma 2, I know that looks like, don't worry, not out. So a couple things that I really like about this. You're going to notice this is a big trend coming out in the GraphQL community. Obviously, we're going to start with a starter kit here because I want to show you something. I want to get you off the ground running really quickly. We're going to choose TypeScript because we want typing. I'll show you why this matters in a second. Also, do you see where it says Go coming soon? Absolutely love that. Just super excited about that. I'm personally a big Go fan. And JavaScript. So this is kind of weird, this question right here. It's asking if you want to create a GraphQL API. That's one example of authentication. It's all done here. Off with 4,000 labs. gRPC and REST. That might seem surprising to some of you that this is a GraphQL framework. The trend these days, a lot of organizations, creating REST endpoints is not fun. Oh, who here loves creating all of those YAML documents? GraphQL for the most part is self-help. What's really cool about this is right off of the GraphQL API, you can auto-gen a full REST API. You could break it down all the way to as isolated a concern as you want or as big a batch process as you want. We're not going to do that right here, but just know like Credit Karma and a lot of other companies that really we wouldn't think they're doing a lot of crazy streaming. They use gRPC plus REST plus GraphQL. Okay, I'm going to click a button. We are going to use Postgres. This is kind of cheesy, honestly, but thanks for the type ahead hints. And we'll call this database foo bars because that's never been used in tech before, right? And what this will do, this will actually validate it, but since we called it foo bars, I'm just gonna crash hyper. Okay. This will really quick. And so I'm gonna call it foo bars. I guess we are now. Oh, look at that. All right, so if we click enter, success. Yeah, you so we're not going to use an existing schema. We're going to create a new schema. I'll explain what that means. And here we'll just call it dev. You can call it whatever you want. It's a schema name. You don't know what that is, or you do. I'll show you in a second. So extracting content to Holla Holla Batgirl. Is that what the song was? Who sang that? Gwen Stefani? Awesome. You all get an A. A for effort. I don't know if you knew this or not, but you were being graded. So what this is actually installing, and Ryan, would you write a server-based GraphQL API in JavaScript? Absolutely not. When it comes down to I/O, JavaScript is fine. Whenever it comes to AST and B-tree complexity, which we are talking about graph theory here, any dynamic language starts to kind of show some of its uglier side. So just know everything in the backend is written in Scala, and it is typed all the way to Postgres, which translates into Postgres typings now. Also, that's called killing time while NPM's running, if you were curious. Okay. And that works. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to go into, hold on. I can't believe I called it that. I'm just going to show you around the code base really, really, really quickly. I don't want to go ad nauseum in here because I want to give you some instant gratification here, okay? Bless you. So what do we have in here? tsconfig, TypeScript. As you can see, not very complex. We're not going to talk about any of the things in here, but it's about as basic as a tsconfig as you can get. What's important in here is look at the package JSON. Very light on the dependencies. The JavaScript community has kind of chilled out a little bit. I heard a couple of people talk about that. You know, JavaScript does it by itself. You don't need Lodash and Lambda. You're going to notice a trend in that here in the GraphQL community. They do favor simplicity over the extraordinary. The only real dependency in here that might seem a little confusing is Nexus and Nexus Prisma. We'll go over that. GraphQL Yoga, there's this trend of doing a dash yoga and everything in the JavaScript community these days. All that is packaging their favorite things together. Convention over configuration. There's JavaScript's GraphQL's version of Rails, dash yoga. Let's go into what really matters, though. Don't look in the node modules, obviously. Or if not, obviously, don't do it. So one of the first things that you get here is you get a schema. You don't have to use this, but Prisma does come with its own ORM if you've ever used Active Record. ORM or ODM, it can be a document mapper as well, which would mean you're using MongoDB, Cassandra, a lot of other stuff that you probably wouldn't use if you're using JavaScript on here. But you have a lot of database options. What's really neat about this, though, is if you want to hit the ground running and you just want to build something, this is it. This is our schema, and they now have migrations. We'll come back to this, but the syntax may seem a little obscure. What's obscure about it is Prisma's DSL. More importantly, if you don't use TypeScript, this is just pure TypeScript right here. All these are annotations. Question mark means optional, yes or no. That means that I return an array of posts. Let's go down here to the source really quick. This schema. So I saw some hands of people that have worked with GraphQL. And the story has changed many times over the past few years, from schema stitching to you should do everything in raw this to you should write everything in just .graphql files. New tech comes with new fun. You don't have to touch this file anymore. That's why I like Prisma, at least on the middle layer, even if you're not using it for the actual database. And why I like it is that, again, we're using TypeScript, but they give you a very declarative way of communicating on the resolver side. So we'll show what that means in a minute or two. Let's get a little gratification going here, though, because I've been babbling forever. So we're going to spin up two things. Number one, this is the cat's meow right here. I tell you what, I hate the stuff I say on the fly. If you see where it says Photon.js, so what that is a small abstraction layer, kind of like React Native now, in the way that it's communicating via a bridge. It's communicating to a more powerful language, not more powerful that JavaScript isn't awesome, more powerful in the terms of it's running on the JVM and it can crunch math. So that's what Photon.js is. What's really cool is I can hit D. It'll actually show me a database diff, but I kind of jumped. And let's just go ahead and jump out of that really quick. I'm going to go into Hala. Really? That happened. Yarban. Okay. So we've got some interesting things here. First, I want to show you this. Absolutely love this. The Prisma admin. This is all in GraphQL too. I'll bring that back up in a second. And then what we have now, if you've learned about GraphQL, you've seen two different types of two different, basically graphical. This is a company that used to be called GraphCool, which Prisma turned into, but this is a nicer way to interact with it. So earlier I said that your APIs are self-documented. Here's our API right over here. What do you want to do? And this literally came out of the box. It was a little seed file I'm going to show you in a second. But you can query or you can mutate data. So you can ask for data or you can change it, mutations. But the cool thing is I could sit here and say, oh, you know what? I want to get some posts back. I want to see everything that Ryan Yogan's talking about. He must be talking about some really awesome stuff tonight. What's he talking about? He's complaining about his Grubhub delivery being late again. But you see the entire structure as this data would come back to you. More importantly, you are querying this on the client side. There's one endpoint. You are not constantly going back to the back end and making new endpoints. And then there's that weak delta of like, oh, we're going to get it, you know, and it's like one team beats the other, then it's back and forth. No, it's over. Unacceptable, especially in the GraphQL days. If something changes, you just ask for it on the client side. If you're like, oh, I need this. Now, if it's an extremely complex query, or if you get down into a depth of like 9 layers deep, you might want to talk to somebody on the back end and be like, hey, by the way, I'm about to pummel the database and ask it for everything. I'm going to ask for 1,000 friends at once. But you wouldn't do that because you love your teammates or you like them. But for the most part, I think that's truly compelling. This allows for extremely agile, extremely rapid development, in particular on the client side. The metrics that have come out from some companies is that they have seen sprints that used to take up to 24 hours for feedback loops go down to like less than like 2 or 3 minutes. I'll get the metrics for you. I'm going to send them out with some other things. So self-documenting, I love this. Now I want to show you something really cool. If I have like another minute or two, I'm probably already 10 minutes over because I am on everything. Something that's really compelling to me about this is what we're going to do is almost everybody has a last name. And we're going to make it an optional string. And I'm going to save that file. Notice, boom, you get that nice formatting. Goodbye, bike shedding, whatever you want to call it. It's formatted the way it's formatted. We'll talk about something else today. What's really neat, though, is if we look here, you see that successfully migrated. And then if we come over here and look at the schema, if you actually were to, we're not going to, last name. So it actually created in TypeScript for me, it generated all of this based off the model. And I just think that's truly compelling. And in fact, if you come over here and you look at Prisma Studio, and if we give it the old refresh, look at users, look at that, last names are blank. What's your last name? My last name is Yogan, I know. Between that and the haircut. I'm not a surfer, by the way. This is just laziness. But over here, this is how you would interact right here, by the way, on the left. That is exactly how you would write something on the client side. You would use, there's a lot of different libraries out there that handle caching and all this other fantastic stuff, optimistic UI, tricking the user. Just kidding, making their experience better. And if we give this the old run, can't query comments, that's the last one, sorry. And look at that. So there was some seed data in there. I don't need the ID. I don't care. Good. I don't want the author's name because I want to take their credit. And, oh, by the way, for whatever reason, UX is just hell-bent on this data coming in this particular order. Boom. That's exactly how you work with it on the client side. So notice how we never went back to the server side and changed the API. If that doesn't have you sold right there, I have an entire 2-week course you will never see because it is so outdated. This is just that easy. I wanted to show you a few other things migration-wise and stuff, but if you haven't dealt with a lot of the complexities before, I think this is kind of... So we added that last name attribute to user, but it wasn't actually available. I didn't show you, because I'm a liar. Go over here to docs, and you can't even see a user, but if you click on sign up a user, notice how it doesn't, this is everything a user encapsulates. Where is it? Well, in our schema, we actually have to say, what can the user declaratively? We have to declaratively, it does not make silly assumptions for us. We're just going to say t.model, and we're just going to say, is it last name? Thank you for programming. Load that up, hit the old docs, sign up a user, boom, last name. Very easy to add. And then you can also introspect the entire schema. Why is that pretty cool? Well, if this is all type safe, and these days on the front end, most people are using TypeScript, that means all the way down to the database, you have a very strict contract and a very fantastic level of discipline that your data is not going to change, it's not going to mutate. GraphQL is immutable after you make the mutation. So anything through the wire, there's no weird objects hanging onto it. So why do I love Prisma? I love the people behind it. To be honest with you, I'm a sucker for following tech that's based off of companies and people I believe in. And I really like the stuff they're doing. I'm not going to talk about Facebook and Relay if you don't know what that is, but just know that Apollo 1, Amazon, and everybody else adopted that, no GraphQL clients. So, Apollo is how you talk this on the front end. But Prisma, to me, I think it's the perfect balance of vendor lock-in and abstraction. Gives you just enough to declaratively work on the domain problem at hand and not deal with all of this nuanced nonsense. If you want to build a proof of concept and if you want to work on something and crank it out the door tomorrow, I think this is one of the best ways to do it, be it at your organization or on the side at home. Go ahead and add the one with auth, hit JWT right there. Worry about the React Native because you all want to use React Native, right? JavaScript? You don't? No? It was a joke. It's just a laugh. But I love Prisma. I really think you should check it out. In particular, if you've never used GraphQL before and you really want to get bootstrapped, in 20 minutes, you're just going to be like, this is just the cat's pajamas. It's awesome. Anthony Jeselnik said that, but his stand-up is funnier than mine. And that's it. So check Prisma out. I really like it. I like to do little talks like this. Just something I'm excited about. I think you should check it out too.
Put that credit card away. There's more. All right, thank you, Ryan.
That really doesn't have you excited.
We have one last speaker who just walked up and said, if you've got time, I can do something real quick. And that's my colleague, Joris Prieto, otherwise known as Alchemist Ubi. And he's going to talk about comparison of Redux and MobX state tree. All right. Come on up.
Yeah. Yeah, if Jurgen didn't prepare, I actually prepared while I was listening to you. So yeah, how about that?
Yeah, Zoom mic.
Zoom.
In the, calendar.
Is it?
What?
Probably. Wait.
Yeah, that one. But we don't
Do
have
you have
those.
an email?
What's your email?
Jordis.prieto@gmail.com. First name, last name, gmail.com, I guess.
What's the first name?
YORDIS.
Yeah.
Dot PRETO@gmail.com.
BRET?
PRIETO, sorry.
At Procore?
At gmail.com.
Oh, Gmail.
Oh, you could do it.
Join that one. You're gonna join both.
So I join this one. Okay.
And then share your screen.
Okay. Hold on. Where's the share button? That's the one. Why not?
Right, and then also check the email.
Email this one.
I think so, it's Gmail.
Are you sure you didn't misspell it? This? No? 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 You guys look into my email? Yes. Did you get it right? My name? No?
Bear with us. We have one streaming service up and running. We're waiting on the other.
Yes?
YORVIS?
YORDIS.
D. Oh,
DIS, yes.
sorry.
No, here or there.
No, your battery's about to die. There's power there.
Yeah, I was actually checking. Oh, yeah, there you go. I got it.
There it is.
Noise.
And then share your screen.
Sure.
Yeah, no.
Cool.
All right,
There it is.
All right.
We're ready? All right. So, all right. So, all right. So, how many of you used Redux before? Daily. Okay. How many of you use Movex State Tree? All right. Daily. Used to be. All right. So, for the most part, when you want to talk about state management, everything would end up around that topic, Movex versus Redux. And when it comes to Movex, there is two sides, twofold. One is more object-oriented, where you deal with classes and you control your classes. And the other one is Movex State Tree, which is more about Redux-like. The difference between them is Redux is using an observable, but it's just one gigantic observable. So by definition, you don't actually can observe individual items inside that in the store. So you have to react to the entire store, regardless whatever happens in the state changes. Movex State Tree could be smart and say, look, I actually use observables everywhere, so I can actually react to particular sections in the store that actually changes. So that's internally the huge difference between them. Now, even when most UIs, the end goal is to become reactive, because you don't have to pay attention to what needs to change on when. All you do is, look, I just care about this data, and whatever that data is, I'm just going to react to it. So you don't have to pay attention to when today, what today, and so on. I don't think the value of Movex State Tree comes from the actual technical side, but more in the soft skill side. Because I don't know how many people you train or how many people you teach JavaScript and Redux from scratch, or how many people come from an environment where they never use React and these concepts. But my experience in the Redux land is kind of frustrating because no one concept is really simple, but it's so simple that still people after 4 years don't get it. So I don't think it's quite simple. And you're going to end up explaining 6-8 different concepts to a person that doesn't even know what JavaScript is sometimes. And that adds a lot of overhead costs and make a lot of people frustrated. And I do believe that software should be friendly regardless your skill level, because that should be our goal. Obfuscation, at the end of the day, it doesn't scale. People will get frustrated, would remove and then start over again something else. So for example, in the classical Redux ecosystem, you have something called contents. So that is a way to hide a little bit of chaos in the software. And those contents, all it does is holding like values like this. So it's matching like a variable to a string, because you're going to use that strings all over the place. Because if you don't do this, then you're going to have to deal with that hard-coded string everywhere in the system. And if that string changes, now you need to hunt in the entire application where that string was used and make sure that you didn't break that one. So that's why people create this. Like you see, because you wanted to use a string, you already add another layer of indirection that add more overhead costs. Because the first question is, from a junior perspective, is, okay, so every system a string? No, it's only particularly when you need this situation. Then you jump into the action creator, which is just simple, just a function that takes a payload and returns an object with the type of the event and then the payload in it. All right, I get it. Cool. So second concept over there. Then you have like more contents. Initial state, which is the initial state of the store, but it's not quite that because some people use it for resetting values as well. So it's kind of like the initial state, but also when you reset values, sometimes it could become the initial state. So then you have the reducer concept, which is something that takes an state, an action, and then you have a switch statement. And switch statements are amazing. Nothing could go wrong there, except that if you forget this over here, this matter. Don't forget that in every single reducer, by the way. You're going to have a hard time. Explain that to a person that has to deal with that. Like every single person that goes in Redux have to actually pay attention to that. And then remember the initial variable with the string? Oh, it's here. Look, that's actually a string. So now you need to explain a person for JavaScript that's actually pointed to a string, that the string points to some specification. Also, if something fails here, is in the whole thing. There's no function encapsulating like it happens here. It's kind of like, no, in the reducer, something fails, and then go and figure out the line. This is fine in development because you could have source map and you could see, oh, it was in this line. In production, all you're reading is T and K and Y and C. Like, have fun, like something blows up. Oh, great. In line 1, column 2,700. Yeah, about that. So there's a lot of, overhead costs. And then you jump into more things, which are the selectors. Explain a selector, something that takes an state and give you a state back. All right, so when to use it, no clue yet. And then you deal with reselect, which is a way to do selectors, but then you have stuff like this, which I really don't know what they are. I'm assuming there are some functions. And then this, which is just another function. And then I have more switches. Again, we go back to whatever happens everywhere. And then I have more selectors. This is a to-do app, by the way. Which is fine. I think the more junior or senior you are, the easier it becomes to understand this and you see the value of it. But at the cost of your mid-level engineers and even people that come from another ecosystem. And I don't think that's valuable enough. Now, let's jump to the... No, that's not what I meant.
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yes. Oof. Okay, let's forget about that. So going back to this, we have one concept, two. So we have the contents, action creator, we have a state, we have the concept reducer in the switch statement. We have more reducers because this is kind of like another projection. We have selectors, and whoever deal with the synchronous stuff in Redux, do you want to talk about that? Sagas versus Thunk versus I don't know how many packages people already came out with, and every single one of them just falls apart. It's really hard to understand, or at least to explain to a person that it doesn't have that much skills in the language or doesn't understand these concepts. Yeah, so that would be like 8 different concepts that you need to explain to a person. Why I love Movex. And at the end of the day, it's almost the same code, but it's an experience. Movex, all you need to understand is 3 things. The model, the data structure you're working with, the views, which are the projection of that data structure or the compute values, and the actions, which how you mutate the data structures. That's it, 3 concepts. I think out of 8, dealing with Sagas and Thunk out of the conversation, that's a lot of things to deal with. So let's actually do a comparison side by side. If this allow me, yes, thank you. All right. One is we no longer work with strings to variables to hashes that point to a function that actually does the thing you actually wanted to do, right? In this case, all you do in your actions, right? Because the actions are the one who mutates the store, is a function name with whatever data, and then, yeah, just the way you used to code in any JavaScript array, just put and patch, and yeah, put and pop from the array, for example. Meanwhile, here that come from here that does the thing. So there is a correlation 1-to-1, by the way. If you change the name of this thingy, and if you don't use a variable, then you have to actually change it everywhere. And that's why people come out with boilerplate reducers. Like they're trying to reduce all the boilerplate by introducing another layer of complexity that eventually would actually fall apart because it doesn't fix all the problems. So let me make this bigger. So yeah, so when you come to the Movex side, all you need to do is specify the data structure. This already gives you type safety, by the way. It actually knows that, for example, when it's visibility filter, let's go to the test case, and I'm trying to do something like this, and I run the test case, it would say, oh, wait, my tests are failing here, hold on. I need to let me make a blow up. So I already told you, hey, you're trying to add something that is not on that list. And you don't have to do anything, it's already type safety. The same when it comes to the loading, right? The loading is an option of Boolean. So if you don't put a Boolean in it, it will complain and say, no, you cannot assign whatever you want. So you have type safety, you have already a schema that you can follow, understand what you're dealing with. How can I close it now? Yeah, there we go. Then here, these reselectings are functions that take state and return states, and then you have all this, which it will become kind of like here. So the complete to-dos, which is almost exactly the same code, just filtering the to-dos that are completed or not, is a getter that just do the filtering. The big difference here is that that is an observable. So that function would not trigger unless one of those to-dos or the to-do list changes. So that's a lot of performance boost. Because in Redux land, you would trigger all the reselect functions no matter what. Of course, you could do some workarounds and avoid that, but again, you have to deal with that. And here, you don't have to pay attention to that because Movex is smart enough to understand, well, yeah, I don't need to run this again if all you changed was the loading state, because the loading state is not being used here, right? It's just being used as to-dos, and inside the to-dos, they're complete. So if inside the to-dos, the test changes, but the complete value doesn't change from the store up here, array of to-dos. So if that changes, but this doesn't change, it wouldn't even render it either. So it's smart to know even in which particular node, what particular value changes, do I need to actually trigger the functions, and just does it for you. When it comes to dealing with arrays, I know for many of you this is obvious, but I prefer to explain a person that reads what remove from an array does than all the spread things and why the spread and the other matters don't flip this, so it wouldn't work. And that's a problem because again, like there is a cost to understand that, and something will go wrong eventually. So the less thing you have to pay attention to, the better. So I think in my opinion, it's better to explain a person, look, this function just remove and add to an array. Especially when you have to do it in the middle of the array, it's not like push and pop. You have to filter. You have to remove something in the middle of the array. You have to take the previous array with someone said, and then the other array, and then combine it together, so you get the final array back. Here will be kind of like, no, just remove this particular items. And yeah. What else? Yes, so going to the test cases as well, right? When you're writing your test cases, you could write in a synchronous way. You don't need to pay attention to like subscribe to things. And I know in the Redux land, you wouldn't actually test the store and the dispatcher, but you will have to write a lot of test cases. You have to write the test cases for the action creators. You have to write the test cases for the reducer. You have to write the test cases for all the selectors, which to be honest is kind of like really nice in Redux because it's really functional. But it forces you some time to write a lot of internal test cases instead of driven by the business rules, which eventually probably will become a little harder to maintain. So testing MobX is quite simple. All you do is just get the store, create it, and then call one of the functions. And after that, I guess we could just do that, and it works as expected. Where is it? Yeah. So yeah, it works. No, it doesn't. And I might. We forgot one. So we could keep appending here. All right. What about that? Yeah, I can add that one. All right. Show all. I remember this one. Then we could probably come here and say, okay, so the store, the visible, by the way, notice that these are completing. Again, like you have all the type spec, TypeScript, all the stuff for free. You don't have to pay attention to that. And then you could know exactly what you could expect at the end of the day, which, of course, in this case will be show all. Ooh, green, I love that. So same we completed, for example, here, let's complete it to do. And if that's true, then all right, look, completed to do, I don't know, the length is to be 1, I guess. Yep, all right, cool. So, how can I open this again? Nope. Where is my code? Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's pretty much kind of the gist of it. And no, there. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, leave me alone. Alright, so yeah, so that's pretty much kind of like a little bit of comparison. Again, like I was just putting this together like side by side, and I just wanted to show you kind of like the similitude between them and what could change between them. So you could take your decision. But before you say this versus that, don't see it like technology versus technology, because it's not that simple. You work with people, so I think like thinking people first and then talk about what is the best technology for the tool. Like pay attention to the mistake your people make, because something I did before I introduced like Movex at Procore was to coach a person to deal with the complexity from the ground up. That person started with only properties, you don't do any state management, and then he started working in internal state because at some point you had to manage it. And then we had to introduce the fractal pattern, because when you work with a one object and you do referential equality, and that have to change, you have to go all the way up in whatever object key you are and change the root of the object. If no, it wouldn't work. So that's the problem with React set state or Redux referential equality. If you don't change all the way up, nothing changed technically. Therefore, you have to figure out how to mutate all the store in every single key, in every single array, all the way to the root, and then it will change. And then eventually we ended up here, because when you work with a graph and you work with the observables everywhere, you don't pay attention to that complexity. All you do is, I'm dealing with this object, I'm gonna mutate it, then you're gonna let the engine to manage the complexity for me. Now, what is the cost? Observable, the only cost they have is you pay the performance cost upfront when you rehydrate from the JavaScript inside the observables. So if you really want to get technical, ask the question, can I pay extra milliseconds when I load the data and I put it inside the store? Because after that, observables are faster than all these things that we do, because they're smarter. So that's technically the trade-off you're gonna make, outside of like the soft skills that people outside of things. So if you have 60 frames per second and you still have 30 left, I would prefer to pay the cost in rehydration, which for the most part happens once, or in most applications, like load data, put in the store, and then voila. Instead of paying the cost in every single re-rendering and React, stuff like that. So that's it. Any questions about Movex or Redux or whatever?
Does Movex have like any kind of like Redux type dev tools, any comparable thing?
Here's a yes, and you could connect the Movex stage tree to the Redux tool, because you could make Movex to behave as Redux, because all Redux is one object with an observable pattern. So in Movex, I think Redux, Movex, state tree, Redux tour. I think they actually make it work in the example. They actually do that though. So yeah, so this is the ball. There you go. There you go. It doesn't get any easier. So you take the store and then you wrap it into this function. That all it does is this have a subscribe and whatever. So you could hook that up with the dev tool from Redux. Because again, like it's not like when it comes to the what you want, they're exactly the same. When it comes to internals, they're completely differently, and the way you work with them. But from these public APIs and stuff like that, they're almost quite the same. One use dispatch with the action creator and object, and then something else. The other one just like, all right, function call here. So yeah, you could definitely make Movex to work with any Redux tool for the most part. Yeah. Go.
So have you done a migration of like a big Redux app to Movex?
Yes. So
what was that like?
yeah. So this is how it will look like for the most part. One is you talk about the first session. I'm not gonna go all the way up, down, because it's gonna be better to go from what you do in Movex in Redux to Movex. So I'm gonna jump to the data store here. So the first conversation is gonna happen in the team is, what are our data models? In this case, a list of an object with keys, which is pretty much what we would do here. Okay, so we have a optional because it can be like empty, if not have to be a list of those things. And then we have another model, right? So that is the first conversation. Then you jump here, because at the end of the day, the complexity before the contents are just hiding the complexity of dealing with string, because you don't want to deal with string. One of those string changes, then you have to hunt that in the application. So the extra stuff is because people have to do it because Movex is quite hard by itself. Sorry, Redux. So all these keys, for the most part, at the end of the day, what you meant in Movex, in Redux is a function. You know, like, why I have to deal with strings that just say add to do function? So you would figure out all the mutations, and then you would have to have some some actions correlated to that, because actions are the only functions that are allowed to mutate the store. So it will be almost one-to-one as long as you have good naming here. It will be one-to-one there. In fact, like if you take a look to the code, for the most part, outside of like spreading things, stuff like that, is one-to-one. After you finish that, you could jump into pre-select or like projections or selectors or whatever you want to call it, and then you could create your own observables based on whatever data structure you need. The difference, like, you don't need to create functions for everything. That's a getter if that's not a function. So you could just create a new key that observes all those values, which that's what is being done here. I know this reselect. And then that's it. After that, all you did is this, again, like, we don't need this. This is just like this dispatcher stuff like that. Oh, okay. So then you need to hunt it all where you did the dispatch and say, okay, I have to store the function that I needed with the data that I already have. And that's it. So that's it's kind of like really straightforward, but it depends on how tightly coupled you develop your system. Yeah. And once, and twice. All right, cool.
Awesome, thanks, Ruby. All right, I want to thank all of our speakers for coming out and speaking tonight. Thank Procore for hosting us. All of you for being here. We want speakers for next month, so you guys can stand up here. You folks, sorry, I'm working my pronouns. You folks can stand right there where all our speakers tonight dazzle us with your JavaScript skills. I have to like exit the building really quickly and pick my wife up from the airport. I'm going to ask my Procore colleagues if they wouldn't mind just making sure everyone gets out safely. This went a little bit longer than I anticipated, and she's going to be landing any minute. But thanks all for coming.